So a term you might have came across in groups and online is subluxing or subluxation. And today I want to discuss what that is, what it isn't, and how can you tell if you're subluxing. So basically, subluxing, if you come across the word, just means partial dislocations. So if you have EDS or HSD, you might partially dislocate. Sometimes people fully dislocate as well, but on a daily basis, a lot of people would sublux. So what does this kind of mean, and how do you know if you sublux? Obviously, it's a different sensation for everyone, I suppose, and not all. You might sublux one way one day, and then the next day sublux another way. It's also different. It feels different to you than it will to someone else, because, how do you explain pain or how you feel to someone? So you'll probably hear people explain it in different ways and how it feels to them. Also, it'll feel different in different joints as well. So if you sublux a hip, it might feel totally different than if you sublux a finger, obviously. So it's common, obviously, for someone with EDS and HSD to sublux and to partially dislocate. The first thing I kind of want to mention about the term subluxation and subluxing, is that it often gets hijacked. So if you ever come across anyone online and they, kind of in the science community, I suppose, and if they don't believe the term exists, it's because, to be honest, it gets hijacked so much by the pseudoscience world and part of things that it's kind of gotten out of hand a bit. So because of that, they're doing our community then a lot of damage. So for instance, and this is just for instance, I know that there's certain chiropractors that would tend to use the word quite a bit. Now, when I say quite a bit, I mean they're using it for everyone in the general public. Now, not everyone partially dislocates, because that would be ridiculous. If you're partially dislocating, there's something very wrong. You've either had a very bad accident, that you've damaged the joint, or if you're partially dislocating and like recurrently, and in separate parts of your body, then you probably have EDS or another connective tissue disorder, or something very wrong is going on there. Now, I know in every country varies, but there are obviously some chiropractors out there who aren't practicing, by the book, or as I said, it varies. So in certain countries, there isn't the laws that there would be in other countries. So we have to take that into account as well. When we're not saying all chiropractors are like this, but as a community, we've definitely came across quite a few, and we've heard it quite often from people who've went to chiropractors and been told, "Oh, I'm subluxing," and you're like, "What's wrong?" And they're like, they kind of have this blasé notion about it that, in fairness, because the chiropractor told them that they're subluxing, and there's just certain chiropractors out there who will literally tell everyone they're subluxing. And it's very harmful. It's a lot of pseudoscience, and that's very harmful, thought process for the patient, never mind for our community as a whole. So if you come across someone who doesn't believe in the terminology, or even a doctor who's been like, it is because of that aspect of it, unfortunately. It's just a term that gets hijacked a lot. But if you have EDS or HSD, you might be subluxing. And I say that because I know that I've met quite a few people that they're either nearly diagnosed, they're on the diagnosed journey, or just diagnosed, and they say, they tend to say, "Oh, I don't sublux, but I do get this pain," and then they start to describe a certain pain they get in a certain joint, and I'm kind of going, that kind of sounds like you're subluxing. Now, I've said this before in other videos. If you've had a certain type of pain and you've been doing something your whole entire life, you don't know any different. I know when I was a child and the doctors asked me before I was diagnosed, what does pain feel like? And I always felt it feels like my joints are being ripped out, pulled apart, But I don't think I ever actually said that out loud, because to say, well, it feels like my joints are dislocating sounds crazy. That's what I thought as a child. I felt like I did feel like I was being overstretched. So, but I still, I suppose, when I first started to hear about EDS before I was diagnosed and the whole subluxing thing, I was like, I was still hesitant to go, oh no, I am subluxing. I knew deep down. But it was still like, God, really? Because I mean, I suppose when you think about it, if you think of someone partially dislocating multiple, countless times a day, in my case anyway, everyone's different, you just think, wow, like how could that even, it's so horrendous, I suppose. And I get that. I see that on people's faces, healthy people's faces, when I'm telling them about my condition face to face, particularly from strangers and things. And I can see that in their face that they're just like, fuck. And I totally get that. But I suppose because I've always had it, I don't know any different. And our pain experiences, because we have a condition, is totally different to someone else's pain experiences if they don't have a condition, if that makes sense. We can have very high pain tolerance. Then some aspects we can have quite low pain tolerance because there's different types of pain that go on in the body, first of all. And then, of course, if you have POTS, there can be pain related to that as well. So I suppose it's important to note, don't be so quick to tell yourself that you're not partially dislocating or that you never have, because you could be, and I can see that when I'm talking sometimes to people, to new patients and, the newly diagnosed, that they're kind of just a bit iffy of saying it because it sounds so crazy, even if you're talking to someone else who's going through the same thing. So I suppose for me, pain-wise, what it feels like, my shoulders and hips clunky. I would say that's a clunky pain. And I don't know, like, how do you explain something? Like, do you know, like, that word might mean a totally different thing to me than it does to you. So my hips and shoulders are clunky. Clunk, 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 clunk. Sometimes a bit of crunch as well in there, but I suppose the pain itself is clunky. Then I can get nerve pain, sharp pains, particularly in the shoulder and going down the back. And often or not afterwards, it's either swollen or warm to touch, especially for the bigger joints. I will say that a lot of the time when I partially dislocate, I don't know about any of you out there, but when I partially dislocate, like a lot of the time, it goes back in very quickly. And I assume that would be the normal for a lot of people. It's just the stretchiness, can I think works in an elastic band sometimes, and it just bounces back in. So there's been times where I'm like, oh, ouch, and it hasn't been too painful. But then a few minutes later, it's starting to throb, that kind of throbbing feeling. And I'm like, shit, I partially dislocated. And it happened in and out so quickly that it took me a few minutes to realise. That by the time I realised, it was long back in. It went back in straight away. So those dislocations are quite, good, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, if you're going to be dealing with dislocations. So then there's, other types that kind of linger, particularly with my shoulder. It tends to be a kind of domino effect. Once it pops out, it's popping out repeatedly. And then as I'm getting it back in, I usually end up getting another part of my arm out. So it is literally like dominoes sometimes down the full arm. My right side is worse than my left side, and that's my whole body, because my right side dominant, which would be pretty normal as well for any condition. Your dominant side, so the side you're writing with and doing most of it, if you're left-handed, that'll be your left, obviously, and if you're right-handed, it'll be your right. If you have any kind of condition, you'll tend to find that. But it's just normal. It's compensation for for the body and how you move yourself. So I suppose then, each joint, as I said, is different, and every person is different. And how you explain your pain mightn't be how I explain my pain. So I just think, if you're subluxing, don't be so dismissive of it, because it might take you a couple of years to even thinking about it, logging your pain, writing it down, to kind of go, maybe this is subluxing, maybe this is what I'm doing. And certainly if you've been diagnosed recently with EDS and HSD, that's something for you to consider, because it's important to be able to advocate for yourself. So if you're talking to a doctor or consultant in the future, that you can say, actually, this joint's dislocating, this joint's dislocating, rather than just simply brushing it under the carpet and saying, oh no, I don't dislocate, so that's something to think about. If you have any questions at all, leave some in the comments, and if you think there's another word maybe that you've seen out there, I know subluxing would be a common one that people are a bit like, what does that mean exactly? if there is any other word that you've seen or phrase that you've seen in a group or a blog or anything, leave a comment as well, and I'll do a video on that if it'll help you out.